Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Network of Quality Teaching and Learning, I welcome you to today's EdTech Lounge session with Dr. Nancy Booker. EdTech Lounge is a virtual space for AQ faculty members to share experiences of teaching and learning during this time of COVID-19. The format is quite simple. The presenter or the faculty member speaks for about 15 minutes, where they share experiences of using technology or online teaching and learning, and some advice for those who are new to online learning. After the talk, we have about 15 minutes for question and answer. Our faculty member is Dr. Nancy Booker from Graduate School of Media and Communications. Dr. Nancy has had a distinguished career as an academic, teacher, researcher, and media practitioner with over 18 years teaching and academic administration experience. Dr. Booker specializes in broadcast journalism, multimedia storytelling, media management, and health communication, and several academic publications in these areas. She has also been trained in leadership at Harvard. Nancy was head of the Department of Journalism and Communication at Multimedia University and was actively involved in teaching, mentorship, research, and curriculum development. She has previously taught at Daystar University and set up the communication department for ABC University in Liberia. She had stints at the National Broadcaster, KBC, and later Nation Media Group's flagship NTV, where she honed her skills. Presently, she is a regular commentator on local TV stations. Nancy has served in various leadership positions and is currently a juror for the Annual Journalism Excellence Awards organized by the Media Council of Kenya. She is a treasurer of the East African Communication Association that she helped found. The organization is involved in harnessing regional synergies and capacity building for communication scholars in the region. Nancy is also a member of the Kenya Editors Guild and most recently served as a member of the Innovation Committee of the Guild. As part of her service to the community, Nancy is the chair of the Kenyan board of Amani Yaju, a social economic enterprise committed to peace and reconciliation for women from several African nations and cultures. So I invite Dr. Booker to share her experience of online teaching during this COVID-19 pandemic.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me clearly from Nairobi. It's pretty cold this morning. This is almost like our winter here. So if I sound a little groggy, that's the reason why. So can you hear me well?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So I'll be sharing our experiences as GSMC, and after my presentation, adult remote learning and teaching in the era of COVID-19, hits, misses, and lessons. And that's the initial topic that I sent, but as I reflected on that yesterday, instead of misses, I looked at those as challenges so that then we can learn from those, from the challenges, as opposed to looking at them as things that we could have missed. I need to be able to scroll. Yes, so I've got the button. So I'll just start by introducing my present learning in a remote environment or in a remote learning environment. Many adult learners ordinarily want to take advantage of online learning environments because of their busy schedules and the convenience that is offered by the online format. And when they do this, they use technology with different sets of expectations that are based on their personal histories and their current realities, oftentimes because they have to balance between work, family and other demands. So prior to joining AKU GSMC, most of our students who are adult learners were taught in a traditional passive classroom, but then when they joined the school where we have adopted the blended learning approach, this enabled them to embrace technology and to explore it for how it can be used to enrich their learning experience. So how did we get here? Which then situates my presentation in context. Kenya reported its first COVID-19 case in mid-March of 2020. And this led to a raft of guidelines from the Kenyan government to keep infection and transmission rates at bay. The Ministry of Ministry of Education suspended, of course in consultation with the Ministry of Health, suspended all on-site instruction. And as a result of that, universities were closed. Stay-at-home directives were issued so that many organizations asked their workers to work from home, and they adopted this concept. Newsrooms also did that, and this is important for us because that's where the bulk of our students work. Media was listed as an essential service in Kenya, which meant that in the midst of the pandemic, work continued for most journalists, even though they were doing this remotely. At GSMC, we suspended all face-to-face classes, and we had a 1-week transition to the online platform. So I'd like to paint a picture for you. Prior to COVID-19, our students spent time online when they did, because a lot of the classes, all our classes were held on site through face-to-face learning. And when they spent time online, it was mainly for some self-directed studies. So making reference to some of the readings that had been shared, very selected. I would say that we weren't really optimizing VLE as much. We mainly used this as a repository for study and a reference point for students. So we hadn't really optimized the use of VLE, in terms of what it can actually do for us. In isolated cases, we had previously held some remote classes, and this only happened in a situation, say the faculty member traveled, was out of Nairobi and still wanted to run their classes, or had sessional teachers or guests who were joining the classes, from a different part of the world. And those were the cases where we held, remote classes. So because of that predominant face-to-face approach that we used at the traditional classroom environment, where the students would come in to class at 5:30 in the evening and be on campus for an average of 3 hours, meant that most of our students, still viewed the teacher as the sage on the stage, so they come to class, they can have done their reading, they've done everything, but they still wait for the teacher to come, and run the class. And so that is what they were, they were accustomed to. And again, this goes back to their history, where a lot of them were coming from contexts where, that's the sort of learning that they were used to. We held check-in calls before this with faculty and with students, but this on average happened about 3 times in the duration of the semester. At the beginning of the semester, some time in the middle of the semester, and as we got towards the end, just to check in on how things were doing. And even where we had conversations outside of those 3 incidences, it was very, very informal, at the coffee lounge, just chatting about how everything was going on. Now all this changed for us in March 2020. And let me just say something that we had IT teams supporting us prior to this, but I think we didn't appreciate them as much as we should have, because before this, they mainly just ensured that we had good connection, and that if we were sharing any slides or audio files, that everything was in order and that we could run the class. So ideally, if that was done, then they could have as well left us on campus to do what we were doing. Now, all this changed for us in March 2020. And lucky for us, it was a time when our students were on a midterm break. And so we just had 1 week to clean up, learn very fast, and set the ball rolling when our students came back. Now, a bit of our adult learners in numbers, just to paint a context for those that are not very familiar with GSMC. Currently, we have 2 active cohorts. We've admitted 3 cohorts, 2018. We have 56 active students at the moment. We have, in terms of gender, 43% female, 57% male. The average age of our students is 32. Many of them having worked in media for about 7 to 8 years of professional experience, and they come from about 20 or so organizations, media organizations or institutions, across the region. So we have a couple of students from Uganda as well. In terms of faculty, we have 4 full-time, and we also work with 3 part-time faculty to enable us run the program. Our typical adult learner is working full-time. So part of the requirement when you join our program is that you need to be a working student. That work experience for us is important because when whatever it is that we are doing almost immediately into their everyday work in the newsroom. So they're working full-time, they're in their early career or mid-career. So, looking at, using this as a stepping stone to career advancement. Most of them have young families. We celebrate lots of newborns, weddings. They're recently married, they have small children. So just being able to balance those dynamics as they come to class is something that we cannot ignore. They also have aging parents, and this is important for us to note, particularly in a context where you have a pandemic, where, initially from very initial reports, the older people were seen as most vulnerable. So just the concern around, their parents, and this also applies to, to the faculty. They work in a newsroom. Most of our students work in a newsroom that has, in the last couple of months, affected pay cuts anywhere between 10 to 50%. And this in itself is likely, has demotivated quite a number of our students, and yet they are still expected to come to class and complete, their coursework. So as they come to class, at the back of their mind, they are also dealing with the pay cuts and what this does, in terms of them being able to, meet their every, and also whether they can access data to be able to come to class. They are concerned about stability of tenure at their places of work as a result of the digital disruption. And that's why many of them came to the program, because they wanted to be versatile, to be able to work across different media platforms. And now they are even more concerned about that stability of tenure because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has, of course, in many of the organizations also led to job losses. This typical learner of ours is also very agile. They're highly adaptable. They're willing to learn. They're enthusiastic, and they're very committed to the program. In most circumstances, they're very happy to share their everyday work and life experiences with the class. And so there's a lot of experiential learning that takes place, but in some of the cases, they'd have to be probed to share. And the teachers are very intentional about, getting out that knowledge that the students have and helping that enrich the learning process. So one of the things that we did when we mounted our classes, moved everything to the online place, was to try and find out from the students what has worked, what really has been a challenge. And for us, then what are the lessons that we can draw from this, even as we prepare for subsequent classes. We have successfully completed the semester. By the time the pandemic struck Kenya, we were halfway through the semester. And in this last week, we've been able to complete the semester. And so most faculty are now in the process where they're grading reflections and projects, and the students have taken a break. So what worked for us? And let me just say that as we got into this, we were, one of the advantages that we have is, we have a very strong network of quality teaching and learning that, prior to this had more or less kind of prepared us for, pushing us towards that online space. And in as much as we were, some of us were not very enthusiastic about it, we now see the benefit of that sort of preparation that we got from that. So in terms of the things that worked, and this is feedback from the students, that one, they really liked the availability of adequate resources enriching the classroom discussions. They felt that a lot of material was shared before the sessions, and so they were able to read, and by the time they were coming into the online class, they had, been exposed to a lot of literature that then enriched the learning. This does not mean that this was not happening before. I guess, there was a lot more appreciation of these resources being shared so that when they came to class, they came in with a lot more information. The other thing that the students said that they really appreciated was the flexibility and convenience. And these are direct quotes from the feedback. They say, I can log in or join wherever I am, provided my internet is stable. I have logged in when I'm in a matatu. For those who are not from East Africa, matatu is a public transport system that carries about 14 people, if I'm not wrong. And, it's used mainly a lot for public transport in Kenya. Another student said flexibility of time depending on how we agree with the lecturer, and that's very, very convenient. So, classes would begin at 7, at 6:30, and it depended on how the lecturer agreed with the class. And one other student said taking classes while still at the office was very convenient for them. Better time management was something that for them was a hit. One of the students said, I'm managing my time well since I work from home, never been late nor absent for online classes. And another student said, I do not have to worry about beating traffic. The connection with others during class time. Now this was quite important, and it came up in the survey that we did, but also whenever we started our classes, we would spend a couple of minutes just checking in on the students and where they are at. And many of them said that the fact that we did not disrupt learning and that classes continued, it gave them something to look forward to, and being able to connect with each other outside of children and their immediate families. It kind of gave them a way to connect with the outside world. So catching up with the rest of students and keeping up with each other despite the hard times. For many of them, they said this was a great learning experience, and for some, this was the very first time that they were taking an online class. Some of the other hits: learning in a relaxed atmosphere. One of the students said, I take the classes from the comfort of my home, and I don't need to worry about changing location and commute time. Then the level of interactivity was higher online than in face-to-face classes. One student said, I participated better and much more during the online classes, which is interesting. And then another, the quality of online teaching. Some of the students felt that most of the online classes were shorter, and yet they learned a lot. Another student said, I learned better online as opposed to face-to-face. Then learning from home was something that the students also appreciated. I can attend to my family while still in school. The comfort of learning from my house is, was something that they appreciated. Then compassionate faculty. Some lecturers have been very, very understanding, so they appreciated that as well, that, faculty were very appreciative, understanding. The challenges, which in my title were the misses, access to data bundles and intermittent power outages. One student said, I've had to buy data and that's expensive. Another one said, let's face it, stable internet connection at affordable rates is a challenge. Remember, they are also taking a pay cut at this time. Data is expensive. It would have helped to have subsidy. Another one said, I didn't have internet previously connected at home, and the pay cut pay cuts do not help either. Now, in the survey, we did, our IT team did a survey just before we embarked on online teaching, and 89% of our students said they had access to internet at home and that they could be able to log in. So one of the things that we've had to do as a result of this is then, provide, we've done that. Balancing between work, family, and school, it was a challenge for them, having to navigate family life and homeschooling for kids, my schoolwork, and above that, managing pandemic-related anxiety. Another student said, I have really struggled balancing work, family, and school. I am at breaking point. And that's, that was something that I think, when you look at your typical student, every time they come to class, you don't imagine that they're carrying all this weight with them. But because they have their kids at home, they don't have nannies, they still have to do their office work, and then there's school work. It's just too much for them to handle. Increase in classwork and expectations. Some of the students felt that the workload somehow became too much, both at work and at school. Another one said, I know school has to go on, but some of us are working under very difficult situations, which takes a toll on mental well-being. And then the other challenge was a demotivated student as a result of the pay cuts at my house. And this was, replicated, a response that was shared across the two cohorts where we did the survey. The other challenge, unable to participate in field assignments, hence very localized content. A student said the challenge of completing assignments that require practical engagement at the time when the COVID situation has curtailed movement, and this is both for their classwork and also for their media work. Newsrooms and journalists are in the front lines too, hence the challenge of finding time. As students said, I work on shift, sometimes the evening shift from 4 to 10. This made me miss some classes. Another one said, I work in a newsroom that required my physical presence and long working hours. Another student said, newsrooms have become more intense and more demanding. And then keeping up with readings and coursework. Being indoors most of the time creates the illusion that one has plenty of time, but it passes by so fast and you end up not accomplishing much. So it's interesting that this was both a challenge, but also an advantage to some, where they're able to take classes from home, but then, just having that discipline to be able to dedicate time to classwork, some of them found that a challenge. So with that then, what have been our experiences and lessons from our experience? And, there's just a lot, but I will, just focus on 7 key learnings for this presentation. That one, adult learners are different from your traditional college students. They have responsibilities. We've just seen from the presentation some of the things that they've said, and this inadvertently interfere with the learning process. So even though they are highly motivated and are task-oriented, we cannot ignore the fact that they bring a lot with them to class. And in this current situation, it doesn't get any easier because in addition to all the other responsibilities they have, they also have to worry about their own health, their own safety, that of their families, that of their parents, and just the whole COVID-19 situation and what it's in the industry. 2, adult learners will have some limitations which must be considered in the design of the online environment. And I think we've alluded to what some of those are. So one of the things that we've had to do is ensure that we are now providing data for our students. We started that just before, I think 2 weeks before the end of the semester, and we are continuing to do that for students who are currently working on their research proposals. Sub-individualized learning experiences may be important for select students. So just ensuring that, for those that are struggling, those that, say they're at a breaking point, just letting them know that if they want to reach out, they can do that, and, having faculty available to, to reach out to them. Some have even asked for extensions on submission of some of their, their projects, and, just being compassionate to just extend that grace to them without necessarily compromising quality. There's no one approach to adult learning. So as faculty, we are learning to be very, very adaptive, innovative, using all manner of ways and strategies, and very accommodative of our students. And this confirms Frey and Allman's assertion that there is not one adult learning theory that successfully applies to all learning environments. The other 3 lessons: not all adult learners are self-directed. Some need structure and an appropriate framework to allow for learning to happen. Again, if they're going to be challenged with, being at home and, just not having a proper structure, some of them have said that they would need that, as they go along. And we've had to find ways in which we ensure that there's structure, reaching out to them prior to class, reminding them of readings that they need to complete and projects or whatever it is, and using all manner of platforms to get to them. The assumption that andragogy, that adults are motivated to learn by internal factors rather than external factors. So that's an assumption of, this adult learning theory. And some of this then include job satisfaction, self-esteem, and quality of life. Now, when these are challenged, like they all have, all those job satisfaction, self-esteem, and quality of life have all been challenged during this pandemic, the learner becomes highly demotivated and will need a support system that sometimes goes beyond the class. And I'm really excited that, the Office of the Registrar and our colleagues, from the Quality of Teaching and Learning Network are, working very closely to ensure that students have access to counseling and other support systems beyond, the class. And then self-reflection, check-in sessions are important for the adult learner. And as faculty, then we have to be very intentional about providing space in an online environment that permits for this, so that they can, speak freely and just, express what they're feeling. And some of that then helps, decompress all the that they have and makes learning a lot more worthwhile. So those are some of the references. And as we say in Nairobi, asante sana. Thank you.